Now to a CBS 2 exclusive months-long investigation, a case that rattled even veteran crime scene investigators. Thousands of fetal remains found hidden in the Will County home of one of the country's most controversial abortion doctors.
Tonight, for the first time, those on the front lines are opening up to our Chris Ty about what it was like to uncover the secret stockpile of Dr. Ulrich Klopfer. And we want to warn you, the details are difficult to hear.
In the 31 years that I've been doing this job, I've never seen anything like this ever.
Probably one of the most unusual cases in our careers.
Has anybody ever picked up the phone and called you and said, I had a case just like that?
Never. Well, it really was unprecedented. Nothing like this had ever happened. There was no handbook on what do you do under this circumstance.
It was awful. I mean, it was an awful thing to view.
Dr. Ulrich George Klopfer was born in Germany during World War II. He became Indiana's most well-known and controversial abortion doctor, operating out of 3 clinics in the northern half of the state.
In layman's terms, what was he doing wrong?
Wouldn't follow rules, wouldn't maintain proper records.
There are tens of thousands of records.
For the better part of 20 years, it was Curtis Hill's job to determine which cases should bring Klopfer to court, both as the Elkhart County prosecutor, then as Indiana's attorney general.
So you don't think you did anything wrong?
No. Midway through last decade, he was in and out of court, found to be in violation of a number of state laws, which led to a suspension of his license in 2016. The staple of Indiana television fell off the radar of Indiana authorities, though, until his death 3 years later.
There had been a grisly discovery in an Illinois doctor's garage.
An abortion doctor who died last week leaves a startling discovery.
Those that prosecuted him in Indiana never knew he lived in Illinois, and they certainly didn't know what he kept in his Will County home near the state line here. A discovery so out there, even veteran crime scene investigators didn't buy what they were hearing at first.
I'm sitting on my couch and I get a call from my lieutenant. He's like, "You're not going to believe this." He prefaced the call.
Heading up crime scene investigation in Will County, Sergeant Jeremy Zanicki has stored and studied everything from the valuable to the vile in this evidence storage facility. But the evidence in this case wasn't just a first for him, it was a first of its kind anywhere.
And I didn't believe him. I thought he was messing with me.
Relatives, while cleaning up the garage following his death, had discovered boxes and boxes that had contained what appeared to be the remains of human fetuses, several hundred at that point. That got our attention.
Last year, CBS 2 shared with you the first look inside that garage.
Can you just take a look at these and tell me what you remember?
You can see in the photos the mold and the mildew. The boxes are crushing the boxes below it.
Old boxes of motor oil and car parts used by Klopfer to keep, camouflage, and catalog his secret. But the lingering question loomed. Why?
At the time, we didn't know if it was a crime or not a crime. When you first walk in, it was kind of just like you're walking into your grandma's musty basement. You know what I mean? Like, it's dusty, not dingy, but just, it unkempt.
Those navigating the front lines of this unprecedented case and those in charge of determining if there was really a crime here, sharing now, for the first time, the details of what they saw.
Grisly is probably not the right word for it. It was just a very troubling scenario. Tissue that could not be identified to human tissue and remains that was very clearly fingers, feet, toes, that type of thing. And it was very traumatic for some of our folks.
Some of the bags you could see hands, arms, legs, heads, of fetuses in the bags.
That's almost hard to hear. How was it to see up close?
It was disturbing. I mean, obviously we all take it differently in this profession of how we deal with it, but we've seen shooting scenes, we've seen suicides, homicides, stuff like that, and it was a whole different scene and aspect of what you were viewing.
Dozens of crime scene investigators canvassed the garage, forming human chains like these to remove and preserve evidence that was both microscopic and massive. Over 2,000 fetal remains in all.
How do you put all that to the side and still do your job in that kind of setting?
It affected some of the members of the department, up more than others.
We had some folks who they were very happy to volunteer the first time, but asked not to go back and we respected that.
What was not found in this musty and meticulous garage? Any clues into why Klopfer shuttled the specimens home. As all of this was going on here, those navigating the scene and the law didn't yet know the case with no precedent, the case whose tiny evidence was being stored in ornament boxes, had more evidence yet to be found.
Several days later, they found more remains in the trunk of an old car. And so the total remains then came up to 2,411.
In the 2.5 years since this story first broke, this garage has gotten a makeover. This house has since sold. And the realization has come into clearer focus that the why Dr. Klopfer did this at all, will never really be known.
These remains had been there for almost 20 years in some sense. So there was a big mystery behind how they got there, why they got there, what the purpose was. A troubling aspect of it that we couldn't figure out was there was a starting point and a stopping point. What we found was that they were all from about a 3 to 4 year period. If my recollection is correct, right around 1998, 99, 2000, 2001, in that range.
And why were those years special?
That's what makes it interesting is what was special about those years. Was there something going on in that time period that made some significance to him?
I personally just think he just had a bad encounter with maybe an activist, and then he was trying to keep the remains from being broken into and being, buried or used for propaganda for whatever side they were on. So I think he was just a few years bringing them home just to kind of avoid all that stuff.
What investigators do have a good sense of is that his widow had no idea these fetal remains were here.
I 100% believe that the family members were unaware of any of this.
There was good cooperation from his family, and did not appear to be any reason to believe that they had any understanding of knowledge that the remains were present, or how they got there, or why they got there.
No charges were ever filed. Klopfer would have faced thousands of counts for illegally transporting the remains over state lines. The fetal remains eventually buried together at a ceremony open to the public here in South Bend. The case that is unprecedented and unthinkable has two key unknowns lingering. Of course, the why. But there's one more.
As we sit here today, do you think there are more remains from Dr. Ulrich Klopfer somewhere in the world?
I don't think so. We certainly weren't able to find them. What we don't know is there's some property that he had that we don't know was his. There's always that possibility, but we exhausted every opportunity that we could find to try to determine that. Did he do this after 2001 and we just haven't found the remains? Or did he do something else with the remains? There's no real way of knowing that. But because he had died, the best evidence that we were going to have of what had happened died along with him.
And we have looked. Police and prosecutors have looked too. And nowhere on earth has there ever been a case like this recorded before. And it's a case the Klopfer family has declined to speak with us about. Chris Ty, CBS 2 News.